This meeting is being recorded.
All right, great to see you guys. We are on Nun Amid Beit. Actually, wait 1 second. Sorry, top of Nun Aleph Amid Aleph. Though I need to review some of Nun Amid Beit to just catch us up to where we're up to.
Nun Aleph or Nun Bet?
Nun Aleph Amid Aleph, 51a.
Okay.
So basically, a lot of our conversation centers around a very brief brisa. The brisa last week said, "Hachalil doches Shabbos divir of Yossi bar Yehuda," that having the flutes, the instruments, will supersede Shabbos, whereas the Chachamim said, no, it does not even supersede Yontif. And the question is, what kind of Chalil are we talking about? So Rav Yosef's conception of machlokas was that they're only arguing when it comes to a sheer shel karban, when it comes to the chalil that was used for that accompanied the karbanos, but the chalil that was for just dancing at the Sukkah's Beis HaShoeva, everyone would agree that that would not supersede Yontif itself. It was reserved for Chol HaMoed.
And they ask, what's the difference between those two Khalils?
So it's same. It could be the same instrument.
Oh, okay.
But it's what it's being done for. So originally, we wanted to suggest, the Gemara wanted to suggest that depends on whether you think that the instruments are an integral part of the avoda itself. If it's an actual component of the avoda, then that would make sense why it would supersede even Shabbos. But if you say it's not an integral part of the avoda, then that could explain the Chacham who say it doesn't supersede Shabbos or even Yantif. But then we realized that this was the wrong machlokis to map it onto, and Rav Papa wanted to map it onto a different machlokis. There's a machlokis Tanaim about who was playing the instruments in the Beis Hamikdash. Was it the Levium? Was it the Levium? Was it the certain Yisraelim who are miyuchasim? Or was it just avadim, servants? So that's where we left off. Essentially, the suggestion was that the Man Da'amar who says that it was avadim, that would explain that the shira is done bepeh, that these instruments are not integral to the avoda, and for the Levium, if the Levium are the ones doing it, then that would mean that Iker Shir is Bekli. That the reason only Levium are qualified is because the instruments are a part of the avoda. So you need someone who's qualified to play the instruments, not just in terms of proficiency, but in terms of being someone who's supposed to be doing it in the Beis Hamikdash. You can't just put anyone up there. That's where we left off. We're on top of a Nun Aleph Mid Aleph, and it's about 8 lines down. Okay, V'tizbara. So we're challenging this. V'tizbara, Rav Yossi, my kasavar. But there was a third shita. Rav Yossi said that Yisraelim who married into Kohanic families who had good lineage, they were playing. But the question is, how does that map onto the machlokas? If we say that the main shira is bepeh, meaning that the instruments are not integral, then why can't avadim also do it? Ika savar ikar shir bekli. But if you say that the primary shira is bekli, that it requires an instrument, levium in Yisraelim lo, then why are Yisraelim able to play the instruments? It should only be levium. So what's this middle position then that lets Yisraelim do it, but not avadim? Ella duklili ama ikar shir bepeh. Rather, that's the wrong machlokus. They're not arguing about whether the instruments are integral to the avoda. Rather, they're saying that everyone agrees that they're not integral. This is a separate machlokus, and this is what they're arguing about. They're just arguing about what was going on in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, great, but l'may nafkamina. Oh, hey, sweetie. Oh, okay. Good to see you. You go back to sleep. Thank you. L'may nafkamina. So l'malin mituchim liyuchasim l'maiser. The question is, are we concerned that if we see someone up there who's not a Levi, are people going to say, oh, this person must have Levi yichus, and also, or like this, sorry, this guy has like good yichus for marrying. And maybe I'll think, oh, I saw that guy duchening the other day. I guess I give my meiser to him. So that's kamiflagi. That's what they're arguing about. The one who says we can even have avadim up there. We're not afraid people are going to misconstrue and say, "Ah, that means that guy must not be an eved. We can marry into his family. Ah, it must be we give him meiser. He must be a Levi." And the one who says we could put Yisrael Elam up there, but not avadim. Yisrael hayu kasavar mal miduchan yuchasin. That we are not that we are that's okay. We are worried that if we put the wrong guy up there, that they'll think that they're eligible for marriage. So you could put Yisraelim who have yichus, avolola meiser, but we're not worried that people are going to construe that they're Levium and give them meiser. Uman damar Levium, how one says that it was only Levium, kasavar mayim meduchim bein lichasim meiser, that we are concerned for both matters. We can only have a Levi up there, lest people misconstrue it. So basically, that was a different way to look at that machlokus. So the question is, this was all within one conception, that the machlokus in the original brisa we saw between Rav Yossi and the Rabbanan was whether the Chalil of the Karban is Docha Shabbos or not. But everyone agrees that for the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, the instruments would not be Docha Shabbos and Yom Tov. That's how we understood everything according to Rav Yosef until this point. Now we're going to reframe everything. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar, Machlokis Bashir Shel Shoeva. Actually, everyone agrees that for the Karbanos, the Khalil had to be played, even on Shabbos and Yantif. Rather, the Machlokis is just limited to maybe we could go so far as to say that it supersedes even the Beis HaShoeva. Rav Yossi Savar, Rav Yossi bar Yehuda Savar, Simcha Yisera Nami Dochas Shabbos. Rav Yossi bar Yehuda says that a great Simcha of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva will supersede Shabbos. Rabbanan Sabri, Simcha Yisera Eina Dochas Shabbos, that a Simcha Yisera will not be Dochas Shabbos. Abel Bashir Shal Karban Divrei Hakol Avodahi v'Dochas Shabbos. But everyone agrees that the shear of a Karban will be Docha Shabbos in such a case. I should note that everything we're talking about until this point is, even though we're talking about being Docha Shabbos, we don't mean being Docha Shabbos on a Doraisa level. What we're saying here is that remember, the Isser of instruments is only Midrabanan to begin with. So when we say the instruments are being Docha Shabbos, we don't mean it's superseding an Isser Doraisa of Shabbos. That's something important to keep in mind. Okay, but now we're going to ask the following question. This framework is so nice, and now the issue is Rav Yosef's framework from before, Meisvei. It says in the Brisa, Shir Shoeva Dochas Shabbos, that the song of the Simchas Beis Shoeva will supersede Shabbos. Divrei Rav Yossi bar Yehuda, that's where Yossi bar Yehuda holds. The Chavamrim Af Yom Tov Ino Docha. It's not Docha Yom Tov. So to Yufta Rav Yosef to Yufta. This is a question on Rav Yosef's framework. Rav Yosef thought the whole machlokis was about the Chalil of the Karban, but he thought everyone agreed you can't bring the Chalil for the Simchas Beis HaShoeva on Shabbos and Yantif. But here we have an explicit brisa saying Shir Shel Shoeva. The song of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva is where the machlokis takes place. And Lema Bashir Shel Shoeva who did pleading. Bashir Shel Karban Divrei Hakol Dochas Shabbos. And the implication is that since they're fighting over whether the Chalil of the Simchas Beis HaShoeva is Dochas Shabbos, but everyone would agree that it would supersede Shabbos and Yantif for a Karban. So Lema Tehavi Tiyufta Rav Yosef Betarte. So this would contradict Rav Yosef on both levels, vis-a-vis Karban and vis-a-vis Simchas Beis HaShoeva, because there's no machlokis for the Karban, but there is machlokis for Simchas Beis HaShoeva. So what would Rav Yosef respond? Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef would respond, Pligi Bashir Shel Shoeva. They argue when it comes to Shoeva, but who I did look Karban. So he's going to try to salvage things a little bit. I agree the argument is a simchas beis hashoeva, but also they're arguing when it comes to the carbon. The reason the machlokis is explicated for the shir shel shoeva is a hodiyacha kochod Rav Yossi bar Yehuda. It's to teach us just how makel Rav Yossi bar Yehuda is willing to be. That he holds even for simchas beis hashoeva could also be docha, but maybe he also holds that for the carbon it's docha and for simchas beis hashoeva it's docha, and the chachamim disagree with him also across the board. But hakitani, but didn't we teach in the Mishnah earlier? Zeu chalil shel beis hashoeva. We taught in the Mishnah. This is the chalil of the beis hashoeva. She'eino docha lo as Shabbos lo as yantif. So the implication again is zeu deino docha aval the carbon docha. But the implication of the Mishnah is that a carbon would be docha Shabbos and yantif. It's only the chalil of the beis hashoeva. So who would be the town of our Mishnah? Money. Ine Rabbi Yehuda bar Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, Amar shir shel shoeva nami docha. But Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda holds that the shir shel shoeva, the chalil is docha that as well. Elav Rabban. Rather, the Rabbana must be the town of our Mishnah. And if that's true, again, to use Rabbi Yossi B'tarti Yufta, because the Chachamim are holding this even when it comes, the machlokes is only when it comes to Simchas Beis HaShoeva. Okay. There's a lot flying over there, to say the least. I have to draw. I don't know if you have an art scroll, if they give you any, but I have to draw like charts in my Gemara just to keep track of who says what according to which. Because it's like a machlokes, and it's machlokes how to understand a machlokes. Anyway, back to simpler things. If you remember, we had this whole discussion about are the instruments integral to the avoda or not. So my time demandamar ikar shir bekli. So what's the basis, right? Like where do I get the idea? What would be my proof, one way or the other, to prove whether instruments are integral to the avoda? My time demand amar ikar shir bekli. What's the reason in the Mandam where it says ikar shir is bekli? D'chsev vayomer Chizkiyahu lahalos ola mizbeach ubeis achiel ola achiel shir Hashem v'achatzotros by dekli David Melech Yisrael. There's this whole explicit pasuk discussed in Divrei Yamim, talking about how they use instrumentation in the Beis Hamikdash. My time at so that proves that they are essential to the avoda. My time at Demandamar Ikar Shir Peh. And what's the basis of those who say that instruments are not essential? So the implication here is that the chatzatzrim were one thing, but the mashorim, those who were doing shira, were doing it just as a cappella, very befitting for sphira. But how does each one respond to the other guy's pasuk? V'idach nami haksiv vayomer Chizkiyahu hachi kamar hechil shir Hashem b'peh ayde klita v'melech Yisrael l'besumei kalas. The other one, the one who says that the instruments are not essential, dismisses it by saying that the instruments were there to just enhance the experience, but it's not a proof that they are essential to the experience. V'idach nami haksiv vayika achad lemechatzatzim l'shorim hachi kamar. Mashorim doing the chatzatzrim. There's an equation between the mashorim and the chatzatzrim. Ma mechatzatzrim bechli, aval mashorim bechli. The same way the mechatzatzrim were using instruments, the singers also, I don't know, they had tambourines or they had instruments also. So basically, you can read the psukim either way, essentially. But that's the basis of the machlokes about whether instruments are essential. Okay? Yeah, Tov.
I'm sorry if, I've missed a few classes and maybe my question was dealt with, but just from quickly skimming back a couple of pages, sometimes the song was Hallel and sometimes the song was Psalms.
Yeah.
So does it make a difference with the instruments which song it was?
You're saying would that change?
Like all this discussion, all this argument about docha, not docha, whatever. Did it make a difference whether we were talking about them singing Hallel or singing Psalms, or it's all the same?
Well, there's different kinds of singing going on, but this was singing that accompanied a carbon specifically.
Right.
I think
earlier on, there was reference to the words sometimes being Hallel and sometimes
Right, and like
being
we talked about Shir Shel Yom as well, that they had a special psalm that they
right.
would
Yeah,
do
yeah.
for the day, which I think accompany the Carbon Tamid. Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not sure about the complete logistics. In Maseches Tamid, it kind of walks through the, step by step of how the daily service was done in the Beis Hamikdash. And we're actually going to see the next Mishnah is going to give us a little bit of a sense of what the choreography was, if you
Right.
will.
But my question is, all this discussion about, the instruments and whether they're doch or not on Shabbos and Yontif, does it have anything to do with what the song was verbally?
So I think that's essential to the machlokes. It sounds like if you hold it's only docha for karbanos, then it had to be songs that were essential to bringing the carbon. But it sounds like right, and maybe just stam shiros that they were singing would not require a kli. Then it's a good point. I'm not certain on that point. Fans, good question. But just to get to the next Mishnah, my friends, and I'll guess the next Amud. All right. So what did the Simchas Beis HaShoeva actually look like? We've been talking about it for so long. Mishal ra Simchas Beis HaShoeva lo ra Simchas Miyamav, right? I'm sure we've heard this quoted. You've never seen a Simchas Beis HaShoeva. You've never seen a true Simcha in your life. They would go down to the Ezras Nashim. Ezras Nashim, again, wasn't exclusively the women's section, but that was just the general courtyard. And they would make big, what do you call it? Refurbishments to it, changes. Menorah Shel Zav HaYisham, there were these golden menorahs there. V'arba Sefam Shel Zahav, they each had like 4 kind of branches with receptacles for a sham. There are 4 ladders for each and every one. There are these, each one then had 4 young Kohanim with their vessels that would go up. They had 120 lugs. They fill up each and every one. So you would kind of take the worn out clothing in order to serve as the psilos, as the wicks. There is no Chatzar Yerushalayim that did not see the light emanating from Simchas Beis HaShoeva. And there were Chasidim and Anshi Maisa, very righteous people who would dance before them, Bavuko Shel Or, with juggling torches of fire, Shivadan, that were in their hands. But Omer Lifneim Divrei Shir Tzvishbachos, they would be singing songs and praises. Balvim Bikinoros, Umedavam, Solosem, Chatzotros, Levim had all their various instruments with them. Klei Shir Blo Mispar, and there's endless instruments. Al Chameshesrei Maos Hayoros Mitzvah Yisrael, and it was on the 15 steps that went down to the Ezras Yisrael, from the Ezras Yisrael, the Ezras Nashim to Ezras Nashim, Keneged Chameshesrei Shir Hamal Shib Tehillim. Corresponding, you'll make jokes, right? The Shir Hamalos. Oh, it sounds like steps. Well, they have steps that were based on the Shir Hamalos, apparently, that were in Tehillim. Shalein Halavim Omde B'Klei Shir. And the Levium stood on top of them with their instruments. For Omrim Shira, and they sang songs. And there are 2 Kohanim who are at the top, the upper gate. Sheyor Ezras Yisrael Ezras Nashim. They went from Ezras Yisrael to Ezras Nashim. V'shnei Chatzotros b'yadein. They had these 2 Chatzotros that were in their hands, 2 trumpets. Kara Hagever, and when the rooster would what do you call it?
Crow.
Thank you, crow. Tiku Bariva Tik Taku. They would sound off the shofros. Then Higila Mala Asiris. They got down to the 10th step. Takbariva Taku. Another round of shofar blast. Higila Azara. When they got to the Azara, Takbariva Taku. They did once again and again and again and again. They would do this until they got to the gate that went out to the east. Higila Shar Hayotzi Mizrach. When they got to that shar, they would turn their heads from east to west. The Amru, and they declared, our forefathers who were in this place, Achoreim el ha'hechal, u'fenehem kedma, u'mishtachim kema l'shemesh ve'enu l'ka'ininu, and we're going to Omer hayu shonav amrim anu l'ka'ininu. They said Our forefathers, they had their backs to the Beis Hamikdash, to God, and they worshiped the sun. But we turn our backs to the sun, and our eyes aren't to the Beis Hamikdash, aren't to God. And that was the ritual that would take place for the Simchas Beis HaShoeva.
Boy, are we missing something?
What?
Yeah.
What were they talking about with having their back to the sanctuary and worshiping the? How could they be their ancestors who were doing that?
They're saying their ancestors were worshiping idols, and they were trying to rectify that. Yeah, I know, it's an indictment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
they were.
we
it's not
say in
just
the
they were.
Haggadah, right?
They said they were doing it in the Beit HaMikdash.
Right. So they go out to face the rising sun in the east, and then they turn around. That's what's going on. Yeah, it's quite a spectacle. Maybe next time before we learn, I'll try to see what some of the Aggadic Perushim have to say on it, which might give us some better insight. All right. Wonderful seeing all of you, my friends. Sorry, I just had a little bit of a headache this evening, so a little out of it. But I'll try to look that up for next time, Bli Neder, and wishing you all a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Take care.
Thank you.